Oh, I think they're doing a great job. A lot of them are.
Good afternoon, Dwayne. How are you?
Not too bad, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today with Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
But I do have some questions.
There are more questions than answers.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today. If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the wonderful Heroes Day celebration weekend as we invite you now to share with us as we welcome our good friends from the Ombudsman's office. So stay tuned for Talk Today.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email Talk Today at candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255. Courtesy of Flow,
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. I trust that you are as grateful and as gracious and certainly as appreciative as I am in relation to being around to see another day. I'm very, very grateful, not only for the excellent work that the office continues to do, but for the wonderful person that it is, Mr. Jan Liebers. It's a pleasure to know you, and over the years, I must share, you've brought a lot of good information, but in a way that makes it not only accessible, you and the entire team, the director and everybody else, it's a pleasure, sir. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me over once again. It's been my pleasure to be here over the years, and hopefully to give you some good information about information.
There it is, man. I mean, information is, they say, key. It's fundamental, and I think, as the Deputy Ombudsman for Information Rights, who better fit in than to bring, and to share with us. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
And it's always good to be able to talk football, with someone else who believes that, like me, Belgium's a good team as well.
Yes. I think I don't know if they're still number 1 in the world, but they were ranked number 1 for some time.
For some of us, they'll be number 1.
Mm-hmm.
After German.
Sure.
All right, and your colleague, Mr. Peter Dinsdale, was a Senior Data Protection Analyst. It's a pleasure to welcome you as well. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah. The thing is, we look at, I think I can still go back to those early days of when we were considering, passing, the Freedom of Information legislation. And then we come on and we had a year of sort of getting used to it. And now, maybe it's just me, but now I think all of us feel, hey, this is information that is accessible. We can at least ask for it. If there's an exemption, well, we can justify it and the like. But increasingly, as a people, perhaps even as a government agencies, we're just put it out there, as of right, which was expectation. So very important, huh?
Yes, you're an optimist. That's great. Excellent.
If you can't be tall, you can be optimistic, right? But then I was wondering, when we looked at the data protection legislation, a friend just said this morning, we just put a spanner in the works. We introduced this thing, and now does that make it better? Does it make it easier? Does it make it more accessible? Does it make it more complicated in administering the legislation? And is it almost, you tell us, data protection.
Well, there's a key difference, or there's a number of differences really between FOI and data protection, and to some degree there's also overlaps. But certainly one area that's different is that data protection is not just about accessing the information, and there are provisions in the law that give individuals the right to access their own personal information. So that is in there. But the data protection law is also very much about how your information is being used. And so when we say, okay, we're going to introduce that law, it comes into effect, there's obviously a certain amount of retrofitting that has to happen. People have to take a few steps back. People, when I say people, I mean in the law they would be called data controllers. So the people that are the businesses or the organizations or the public authorities that are using the information, using the personal information, need to take a few steps back and basically say, are we doing this right? And so this is a bigger proposition really than FOI, which is really, first of all, only applicable to the public sector, unlike data protection, which is pretty much universally applicable, also in the private sector, but also that so it's applicable in different ways, but it's basically a slightly different beast, if you will, and that does take a little bit more preparation really to be compliant.
I think, Mr. Lindsay, that's the key word, beast. It's a different beast.
It is absolutely, yes. I think the DPL, it's kind of based around the kind of 8 core principles, which are just good data handling practice for organizations. It's about telling people what you're doing with their data, making sure that you're only collecting the data that you actually require for your purposes, making sure it's accurate and up to date, that you're only holding it for as long as you need it, that you're respecting the individual's rights under the law, you're keeping it secure, and if the data is leaving Cayman, that you're putting additional kind of protections in place to make sure that the individual's rights are still respected.
So in a sense then, and I asked you to guide me because I think as we look at it, it's both us as individuals making sure that we're looking after ourselves, but then we, the data controllers, we're the big organizations, public and private, making sure that we're not only compliant with the law, but we're responsible in the collection, the storage, and the utilization of the data.
Yes.
A friend says an analogy would be you're this big, fishing fleet in long liners, and you just throw everything out and you're dragging and everything comes on board, as opposed to being selective. I only need this piece. Is that sort of how it is? You got to be careful that you don't just throw a wide net and you capture everything, and what you get, you just throw it out there and you lose what you lose.
Well, it depends. I mean, a lot of smaller organizations or even bigger organizations that don't do very complex things really maybe don't have that many different types of activities that involve personal data. But any organization, any business, any public authority will have some. So, for instance, one aspect that is sometimes forgotten is the organization or the business or the public authorities' own personnel, own employees. Of course, if you have employees or if you have volunteers, you have a certain amount of personal information about them. So it's going to apply to you even if you have nothing else really that is personal data. So yes, it can be quite a wide net if you're an organization that does a number of quite complex things with people's data. Then yes, you have a number of different data streams, different activities, and each of those has to be compliant, has to be looked at and made sure that they meet those principles that Peter just indicated. But it may also be that you're actually doing not that much, and that that's a fairly simple picture.
As I listen to you, I'm thinking more and more, whether we go back to our early readings of things that then seem like science fiction, or even we were, in our minds somewhat intellectual and reading Orwell and the like, and fast forwarding a century later in some instances. But data and privacy and protection seems to be the new capital. Mr. Lindsay, what do you think?
Absolutely, that's a very wide question, and thank you for passing it over to me.
Well, we voted. We thought, not just the most handsome, but
that's it. I'm out of here.
Don't worry, I'll have you around later.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely, I think it's we all need to be aware when we go online, when we use apps, the Facebooks, Googles, Amazons, etc. They are huge data kind of suction devices, data vacuums. They're taking in every single little piece of data about your browsing, about your purchase history, about who you are, and they're also going to be matching that against other data they've got in their systems, and they're using that to target advertising, target products at you. And I think perhaps people don't always appreciate quite how much of their data is being used and kind of collected online.
I recall the conversation, sometime back. Mr. Liebers, was it Honorable Attorney General and some others yourself, and we were talking the notion that some of us, perhaps because we just want to have fun with the cashiers and the storekeepers, and like some was because we've had enough of you asking us. You don't need to know. You would not normally give out certain information, and when they ask you for a telephone number, seems rather innocent, but with that telephone number, they could probably target at least your area, potentially accessing other information. All of a sudden, they have a profile. For some of us, we don't really think twice. Others increasingly become a little bit more conscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've just sort of over the last 10 years, 20 years, particularly the last 10 years, increasingly just given up so much of our personal data without even flinching, really, without thinking. And that goes on, that continues to go on. And I'm as guilty as anyone else of that. I mean, you download an app that you think will be helpful, and it is. And then they ask you that question, have you read our privacy policy? And we all go, yes, just get me to the app, and that's just sort of the way we've been. In a way, we've been a little cavalier maybe with our own personal data. But I think there's actually more and more awareness, and there's more and more, and I think this data protection law and the whole development of data protection and the fact that it is being renewed in Europe and in other places. California, for instance, came up with a very strong law recently. Is also an indication that there is more awareness and that there is more questioning, really, of these sort of practices. But it's not only those practices, obviously. It's not only the high-tech companies. I mean, those are very good examples of sort of profiling and of use of all sorts of different data. I have one example, for instance, the company Cambridge Analytica, sorry. They were involved in the last U.S. election, and they were involved in the Brexit vote, and they were involved in a number of other votes around the world, and they were sort of using their way of profiling individuals in a political sense to really find people who might be receptive to certain messages and so on. But apparently Cambridge Analytica they got most of their data from Facebook, apparently, or at least in the US election and so on. But apparently they had about 5,000 data points on each individual that was targeted. I mean, that is an enormous amount of data. I had always heard that if you knew sort of, if you had about maybe 200 or 300 data points, that you probably knew the person better than they knew themselves. Well, what happens if you have 5,000, So that's troublesome, I think.
Right. Well, when we come back from the break, as we talk about International Data sort of Privacy Day, as it were, we were looking at how data is used, stored, collected, even ourselves. Could we also look at it from the perspective of maybe the rights and responsibilities of us as individuals as well as the organizations, the data controllers and the like, and maybe get a few of us to start to appreciate that it isn't for them as much as it is for us. And in that whole discussion, see what we can understand more about it and what we can do. All right, well, the phone lines are open if you want to call and share a thought with us. We won't ask for chocolate, we won't ask for stewed turtle. Conch might be nice, but anyway. It's only lunchtime. All right, stay tuned for Talk Today.
Water Authority Cayman would like to advise its valued customers that its main office on Redgate Road will be closed early on Friday, January 31st for a staff function. Cashier hours are 8:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Customer service from 8:30 a.m. until 12 noon. Water Authority Cayman apologizes for any inconveniences which this early closure may cause on Friday, January 31st, and would like to thank you for your understanding. For emergency assistance, please contact 946-HELP. That's 946-4357. Water Authority Cayman, suppliers of the world's most popular drink.
Need a prescription filled but you're on the go? No problem. Healthcare Pharmacy is now on WhatsApp, 329-7313. You can request your prescription medicine or refills and even a prescription transfer from another pharmacy. Simply WhatsApp a photo of your prescription for us to fill till you arrive with the original. Have questions? Our pharmacists are happy to help. Collect your filled prescriptions at Healthcare Pharmacy in Governor Square or Grand Harbor. Go on, WhatsApp us on 329-7313. Healthcare Pharmacy, we care about your health.
Count on Us Cayman Limited. Count on Us Cayman Limited. Let me see where I can find this in this book.
Count on Us Cayman Limited? What are you talking about, Susie Q?
Nita, Count on Us Cayman Limited. Let me tell you, it is a small, robust service company in Cayman. They offer bookkeeping services, property management, and that's not all. They also offer a variety of other services, such as customs brokerage and Cayman auto and tech services.
Then it sounds like I don't have to run all over town like a chicken with its head cut off to get my business taken care of. I can just call. What's that place called again, Sue?
It's called Count on Us Cayman Limited. They take the time to understand your business. If you need more information, you can give them a call at 623-6941 or you can call 323-3995. And if you need to email them, the email address is info@countonuscaymanlimited.com.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. And as we get a chance to talk about data protection and International Data Privacy Day, hopefully I got that correctly, from the Ombudsman's Office, the Deputy Ombudsman for Information Rights, Mr. Jan Liebers. Again, very, very, very grateful for you coming along, you, your team, and for sharing with us, helping us to appreciate and understand the importance of our role as well, whether we're just the product, as it were. And of course, your colleague, Mr. Peter Dinsdale, that was us. Make sure the Senior Data Protection Analyst.
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, only other job in the civil service is more important than as Deputy Governor. I mean, he's like, man, he's at me again. No, but in that itself, data protection, is so key, and I think we don't sometimes appreciate how fundamental our role as that individual. We log on, we use, whether we're the parent or whether we're the young child, how much information sometimes we so willingly give away that is then potentially utilized by other organizations to make a lot of money. So money is in the game.
Yeah, I mean, and just to clarify, I mean, obviously, personal data has to be collected. It has to be used legitimately in many, many, many different ways. There's no avoiding that. We're not saying, obviously, that nobody should use personal data for any purpose. There's lots and lots of very good reasons, including legal and contractual and all sorts of other reasons that your data needs to be, provided and so on and so on. If you go to the doctor, you're not going to say, I'm not going to tell you anything about myself or my medical history because you'll be processing my data and I don't like that. I mean, that's not how it works. You do need to provide data in a lot of different circumstances, and that's fine, and that's recognized in the law, and the law doesn't prevent that from happening. But there's also a lot of excessive use of data, excessive data being collected, and we see examples of that. I wouldn't say exactly on a daily basis, but almost, where people are asked for a copy of their passport to buy, whatever, a plant or something, or examples like that, which indicate that liberties are being taken, and that's what the data protection law really, or one of the things that it really protects against.
But is that then part of, I guess I should say that's part of the reason why I enjoy this discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to have more of that in other years, so that as a people we become not just familiar but actually much more knowledgeable about our rights. If I go somewhere and they say, okay, well, you're presenting some form of payment, can I have an identification? Well, is one acceptable? Do I need to put 5? Or is one okay and one isn't, even if they're both national? And what rights do you have to refuse? Or if you refuse because you don't provide one, well, what sort of right of redress do you have? Sometimes some of us don't know and we're intimidated. People ask you for, go back to the cashier, can we have your zip code, your telephone number, or some of the information that you would not normally give to a stranger at a bar. Comes and asks you for your telephone, you would probably not be so inclined. Probably not. Maybe on Mondays. Mr. Dinsdale.
Yeah, I mean, you put it very well just before the break. There are responsibilities on organisations to make sure that they kind of follow the principles in the law. there are responsibilities on us, the ombudsman, to make sure that we enforce the law and investigate complaints, and also make sure that people out there are aware of what they need to be doing. But of course, there are also rights for individuals, and we need to kind of make sure that people are able to understand those, to make sure that they recognise those situations. You know, they can ask the question, why are you actually collecting that data from me? What's the purpose of it? And you should be telling me this.
Is it then that if we were, it's a commercial transaction, you were some sort of retail outlet, we may be more inclined to ask, well, why? What is it that you want? Whether we're polite and professional, whether we're otherwise. But if we were at a government agency, you're at the airport and the customs and immigration people asking you a question, the airline staff asking you a question, or what have you, you probably would say, okay, but which blood sample do you want? Which vein do you want to take it from? You're probably more inclined to offer up whatever information that they're asking. Are there instances where you can say, well, irrespective of the transaction, what is it that you're requiring?
Well, at all times, I mean, one of the principles, as Peter explained, is about the data that is collected not being excessive, and I think that's a very important principle. It's a key sort of idea, really. For instance, you may need to, in some capacity, in government or in private business, you may need to check someone's ID, make sure they say who they are. They say. And that may be fine. That may be legally required. It may be perfectly part of a legitimate process, and that's fine. So perhaps it's okay then to say, can I see your driver's license? Can I see a photo ID? Can I see your passport? Maybe that can be perfectly fine. Is it then necessary to take that passport and to make a photocopy of it and then put that in your files? Well, in some circumstances it may be. If you need to keep, an audit trail, if you need to show that you've checked and so on, that may be perfectly legitimate again. But it is obviously being done. That particular thing, that particular copying of your ID is done probably way too often, and in situations where, you've checked my ID, you know who I say I am, let's move on. You do not need to keep that information. Now, I'm generalizing here, and I don't want to create the impression that is absolutely a no-no, because as I said, there are situations where that's perfectly legitimate and that has to happen, but it is being done in too often. And that's just one example, but it's a very important one, the excessiveness of data gathering. And that's where, as you say, it comes in where we as individuals need to exercise our rights and basically ask, why do you need this? What are you using this for? How long are you going to keep this? And the law speaks to that in the form of the obligations on the side of the data controllers, i.e. the businesses, the government entities, and so on, but also in terms of the rights of the individuals. And as individuals, we should be aware of those rights and exercise those.
If it doesn't exist, should it, where organizations, public sector as well as private, just like they have on their walls somewhere their business license, they have other things, should they then have a code, a charter under the law? Your data is subject to this, and this is what our responsibilities are, just like you would anywhere, prominently displayed, so that you can say, well, if you choose to refuse, here are your rights to refuse, and these are the grounds on, so that you know whether or not anyone will read them.
Yes, and that's really what we mean when we say a privacy policy or a privacy notice, or both of them. In other words, this is also part of the law, and it's actually part of the first principle, is about transparency, essentially. So, and again, there are exceptions to this. There always are, and this is a complex situation. Sometimes this law applies to many different situations. So it sometimes gets complicated, and there can be exceptions and so on. But the question is, in terms of transparency, is really, you need to inform people what you are going to use their data for, how are you going to be using it, and that's not terribly complicated necessarily, depending on what you do with the data, but people should have a sense of should be informed about how their data is being used. Sometimes
people, we ourselves may have done this before, whether it's a government agency or, not to pick on banks, but financial institutions. Well, I just gave you my driver's license. was that last week or last year? Didn't seem that long ago. What are you asking for it again? Or you want a copy of something to show my physical address? But I just gave that to you. Ever so often, someone seems to think that they really asked for this thing. Or if it's a government agency, we will, agency A today, and they want a copy of the passport. And then next week, we agency B. But wait a minute, you're all government. Why do I need to give every one of you copies of these things? In those two instances, anything that we should be concerned about, Mr. Dinsdale?
Yeah, I think we have to acknowledge that there's obviously a wide range of different services across government. We would look at each of the ministries, for example, as probably being a separate data controller under the law. So while there may be some sharing of data across and between those ministries, the data controllers for certain purposes, I don't think just because you've given your passport to one of them, it would necessarily always be shared across all of them. So it may be slightly inconvenient and annoying occasionally, but there probably is a legitimate reason that they've not just immediately then shared that with everybody. And I guess it's a security measure to ensure that your data and your account is being kind of managed properly so that they can say that it is definitely you they're speaking to. So sometimes it can be a little bit of a kind of good data protection can sometimes seem a little bit kind of a hindrance to you, but I think there's usually a good reason behind it.
I think that as a listener, we're becoming, I think for me, more for us as the individual to be a little bit more conscious of how we protect our data ourselves, but also how we share it. Here's my driver's license. No, you can't take it with you. You can look at it. Some of us will just give it out, and others will say, I need to copy it. And there's that back and forth. You ever watch the transaction? I've seen it just recently. I'm not giving you this. No, take it. I'm going to give you this. It's like our credit cards. We've come to a point where in some transactions we no longer hand the credit card over to the person who is going to be processing the payment. Now they give us a little thing and we stick the card in. If we do swipe it, and then we enter a PIN. All because of, we've seen the safety, security, and the privacy. Interesting times, and maybe a chip isn't that far away.
Well, and the thing is, and this is to some degree best practice. It's not necessarily a legal requirement under the DPL, the data protection law, but the default should always be privacy. You should always have a default setting of privacy. You should not assume that people want to provide you with data in excess of maybe what you legitimately can ask under legislation or something. The assumption should be, and this is true for systems and apps and websites and cookies and all sorts of, and I mean the electronic form of cookies.
Oh, that's exciting!
I'm getting hungry. Does it show?
Me too.
Talking about conch and about cookies, and anyway, so in all of those contexts, that's an important idea, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, then when we come back from our break, very short break, and as we conclude our discussion, could I ask if there is on a part of us now, the product, the individual person, should it be our default to hand it over, to whatever information is being asked, or should we question? Well, wait a minute. You're asking for this. Why? It doesn't matter, who is being sort of making the request, or what should be the protocols to ensure that we are responsible and civil and certainly appropriate. Let's start there when we come back after the break. For those who are listening, we invite you to join us. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Do you stand for Christian family values? Do you support Caymanian democracy? If you answered yes, then join Cayman Cause in association with the Christian Association of Civics, Cayman Ministers Association, and Conference of the Seventh-day Adventists on Sunday, February the 2nd from 5 to 6:30 p.m. at the Legislative Assembly in Georgetown. Learn the truth about the recent appeals court ruling and its impact on the marriage laws and Cayman society. Speakers include the Right Honorable Dame Joan Sawyer, Mrs. Katina Anglin, along with musical performances and light refreshments. For transportation, call 917-2985 or email caymancause@gmail.com. Stand for Christian Values 2020, Sunday, February the 2nd from 5 to 6:30 p.m. at the Legislative Assembly in Georgetown.
The Lions Club of Grand Cayman Breakfast is back. Yes, Saturday, February 2nd, starting at 7 a.m. at the Lions Community Center. Enjoy a tasty Caribbean breakfast of fried fish and fritters, liver and onions, and ackee and saltfish, starting at only $10, and help support your community. The Lions Club of Grand Cayman supports sight screening, prostate and colon cancer awareness, Miss Teen, spelling bee, and so much more. Get your Caribbean breakfast and support the Lions Club of Grand Cayman in their community efforts happening Saturday, February 2nd, starting at 7 a.m. at the Lions Community Center.
Go coconuts with Cocoa Fest at Pedro Castle on February 8th from 12 to 6 p.m. Indulge in all kinds of coconut things. Coconut-inspired food, treats, fresh coconut water, crafts, games, music, and more. Admission is only $5 and free for kids under 6. Proceeds from each entry fee benefit Meals on Wheels Cayman. So if you like coconut, come to Cocoa Fest at Pedro Castle February 8th. For event details, check us out on Facebook. This ad is sponsored by Fidelity Bank. We're good for you.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. And as we talk about data protection legislation and International Data, Privacy Day, the Deputy Ombudsman for Information Rights, Mr. Jan Liebers, together with his colleague, the Senior Data Protection Analyst, Mr. Peter Dinsdale. Man, it's a good day. You imagine today was Monday, how much better it would be? Yeah, I don't think so. All right, but in talking about it, got a couple of questions or two from the WhatsApp we want to pose as well. But the notion as we look at the importance of today in data protection, Mr. Yan, what else you want us to maybe get to before we get through?
Well, I mean, so the law is I think important, and it is all pervasive. I mean, it does cover all sorts of different public and private sector activities. I mean, everything, and so the principles are there, and the obligations on data controllers are there. But and a lot of our attention actually in terms of outreach has gone towards helping to prepare businesses and government and so on. So we've done a lot of outreach, a lot of presentations, and they've been really focused very much on the obligations. But one thing that we want to now sort of shift towards in this coming year is starting right now actually is to really talk more about the rights of individuals under this law, because that's certainly the other side of the coin. So this is very much about personal data. So it's very much about individuals, and individuals are being given a certain amount of power really over how their information is used and what they can do and what they can object to and so on. But of course, you have to get the message out, and you have to let people know, and that's what we hope to do in this coming year in terms of outreach, as well as still raising awareness in the business community and in government and so on as well. And so some of those rights are absolutely key, and they may sound familiar to some degree for people familiar with FOI, but they are also slightly different because they are also about using how the information is being used, not just about accessing. So first of all, as an individual, the biggest, the most often employed right perhaps is the fact that you can access your own personal data. So you can ask a company or a government entity and say, what is it you have on me? But not only that, but you can also ask, how are you using it? What sort of security measures do you have in place? Are you exporting it? Are you sharing it with anyone? And so on. So there's a form on our website which can be helpful for those people who want to make what's known as a subject access request. So it's really you asking for your own personal information. And there's a handy form on our website, and there's also just information. There's a lot of guidance on our website for individuals as well about that. So that's a very big part of it. But there are other rights as well, and maybe I can just switch over to Peter for a second, who may just very briefly mention a few of the other rights.
Of course, yes. Individuals also have the right in certain circumstances to ask organisations to stop using their personal data. It's not a universal right. It's not in every situation. I mean, you could imagine if the police were conducting an investigation into a gang of criminals, the criminals can't put in a request under Section 10 and say, could you stop that investigation, please? that wouldn't really help the work of the police particularly. There is one absolute right under the law, which is the right to have your data stop using your data for direct marketing purposes. So if you're getting texts through or emails through from an organisation, you do have an absolute right to tell them to stop, and there's no circumstance in which they can ignore that request.
So now, if that's a large retailer or I call them a telephone company, but nowadays they probably call other things, but one of those, what we used to call telephone companies way back when, they send you, let's use a text, they probably send you all sorts of things these days, and they'll advertise in, hey, we have a thing coming up. Can you respond to them and say, listen, okay, I know I'm your customer, but don't send me, I'm not interested. You can ask them, the retailer or the telephone company, or hey, just take me off your list. You can request that, and they have to comply.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely. If it uses your personal data for providing that marketing to you, then you have the right to stop it.
And not to belabor, but in this instance, your email address, your telephone number, something that gets that information from them to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. See that? Who knows? You could learn something on Talk Today. That's one thing.
Yes, absolutely. And there are a number of other rights as well in the law, but perhaps we won't go into those right now. But they also relate to really giving more power to individuals about their own personal data and how it's being used.
Okay. Yeah. We have a question on our WhatsApp. Question wants to know whether the data protection law covers inaccuracies that are reported in the media.
Well, in one of the rights that I just said we won't talk about, I will talk about now, which is the right to have your data corrected. Mm-hmm. So if data is inaccurate, you can demand, basically ask that be corrected, and of course over all of these rights. Or hovering in the background with all these rights is the fact that if you don't get what you think you are legally entitled to, that you can actually raise a complaint with the Office of the Ombudsman, which is ourselves. Mm-hmm. So that's also a right, which is the right to complain. It sounds a little funny, but that's actually in the law, and it's very important. So you can insist that the data be corrected. Now. The media have a special role in our society. We're a democracy. We have freedom of the press. We have freedom of expression, and it's fairly typical in all jurisdictions that the right to privacy basically sort of has to be balanced against the right to free expression. If I say something about you, that may be on the one hand infringing your privacy, but it's actually my freedom of expression to say it. And that's particularly true for the press. So that balance would have to be looked at, and there's a particular section of the law that deals with the kind of special provisions that apply for journalism. Mm-hmm. So we would have to look at that. So it's not unfortunately an all or nothing response. Right. And I don't mean to avoid. I mean, I'm not trying to avoid answering the question, but obviously you would have to look at the specifics and say, is this being used for journalistic purposes? Yes or no? Etc., etc., and then basically from there draw conclusions as to whether that was appropriate or not. Because if it is in a journalistic environment, you would then have fewer rights as an individual, because the press has to be able to do what they do. So there's a balance to be struck there, and that's where we would come in, basically, as the entity that enforces the law.
Well, I guess in a sense you've sort of answered my supplementary that I've been asking, to what extent, if any, is the media exempt? And then I guess it comes back to depends.
Yes. I mean, there are specific provisions in the law. For instance, this right that Peter mentioned, where you can say, I wish you to stop processing, and he gave the example of the police, where you can't go to the police and say, I want you to stop processing my data. If you're under investigation, they don't have to comply with that request. That also applies actually to the media. Like a person who's being written about in the press, be they a politician or someone else, and they may not like what's being said, but they can't say, "Oh, you're processing my personal data. I want you to stop doing that." That is not. That's basically an exception to that right. Under our legislation. So the press does have a certain amount of liberty to do what they need to do in a free society.
Well, I guess to this sort of, invites further discussion as we, I don't want to say evolve, but as things gradually change in our society. The definition of what is a journalist and what constitutes, press, the media, as that is changed and changing, what platforms are applicable and covered and the like. Right, Mr. Dinsdale?
Absolutely. There have been a couple of landmark cases in the European Union recently which have really kind of extended that definition of journalism, and it does include citizen journalism. There was a case in, I think it was Latvia, where an individual was speaking to the police in their kind of reception area, and he didn't like the way he was being treated, so he took a video of it and he posted it on YouTube. The police demanded he took it down, but he took it all the way to the highest court, and they said, no, this is journalism, this is citizen journalism. He has the right to post that.
Yeah. And I think as we see one jurisdiction and then others say, well, that's over there, doesn't apply here. Internationally, some of these, for one of our practices, are starting to emerge. We see it increasingly, I think, I call them cell phones, maybe there's a better word for these days, but people in public spaces with authorities, I'm going to video this for document, for protection. And there is a question, well, no, you're not going to do that. Oh, yes, I am. And then that results in more than just a heated discussion. To what extent is that protected? We're watching things evolve, huh?
Yes. I mean, and we don't want to create the impression again that there is sort of a blanket response to that sort of question. We'd have to look at the specifics and really see what was posted and so on, because obviously you can also have situations where you can post, very sensitive, personal data, and you're not acting in the public interest as a journalist, and that might violate the law. So
and the role of the bystander as well comes into play. The courts, we see, was it adverse inference, which I thought was kind of interesting. Anonymous testimony, no longer the right to face your accuser. All the things that are changing for the good or for the better, we'll see.
But I think one of the important things about this law is that it basically says, look, all the technology and so on has evolved over these years, and it recognizes that, and we don't know where this technology is going to take us in the next 10 years. But it does send a message saying, look, we cannot ignore the privacy of individuals. This is also a very important value of an open society. Strangely enough, I mean, we're talking about an open space, but we're actually talking about closing it because of privacy. But you need that. Individuals need to have a private space to be able to function and to be functioning independently as human beings. And that is, of course, very, very important as well.
An oxymoron, there was one, huh?
Right.
A true definition, I think.
Yes.
But I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that you can. Thanks for taking the time with us. As we close the discussion, first, Mr. Dins, anything in particular, not just for data protection, but data protection, in addition to International Data Protection Privacy Day, that you want to share with us?
I think really the message we want people to take away is to go out there and actually learn what their kind of rights are under this. Try and educate themselves a little bit using the guidance on our website to try and kind of understand how the law can help them. And to that end, we're actually running a public sort of awareness session at the library in Georgetown on Friday afternoon, 2 till 4. We introduce the basic principles of the law, explain people's rights and organisational responsibilities. And everybody's free to come along to that. They just need to email us on the email address that's on our website, and we'll be able to pick up and add their name to the list.
All right, so this Friday at the Georgetown.
This Friday, and actually every month we will have at least one of those sessions, and probably more specific targeted ones as well, but definitely one of those open sessions per month this coming year. Yep.
Let us know how we can, give people a heads up, remind them, because it's important, knowing our rights, understanding our responsibilities, but appreciating that there is a recourse, put your office to much more work anyway. Not like you need it, right?
Well, no, I mean, we have our team under Peter here, and we're ready.
All right. Well, thanks very much. I invite you to enjoy the rest of the week. Please accept the public invitation if we can be of any value, giving the public a chance to be informed and engage. We're happy to do so. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for having us.
Always
Absolute
a pleasure. Let's pause and take a break. When we come back, we invite you to be part of our discussion. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have, on the island.
Your voice, your choice. For today's biggest news.
Access to information. Local, regional, international. This is headlines from Radio Cayman's Newsroom team.
Today's biggest news.
I'm April Cummings with your latest headlines. Representatives from the Royal Cayman Islands Police, Customs and Border Control, the Financial Reporting Authority, and the Department of Commerce and Investment were among those participating in a 5-day professional certification course recently on anti-money laundering and countering terrorist financing. The training was organized by the Ministry of Employment and Border Control through the International Center for Parliamentary Studies. In international headlines, the pressure on Britain's disgraced Prince Andrew increased today after the revelation by U.S. authorities that he has failed to cooperate with the FBI's investigation into his ties with late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Lawyer Lisa Bloom, who represents 5 of Epstein's alleged sexual trafficking victims, said it is time for Prince Andrew to, quote, stop playing games and to come forward to do the right thing and answer questions. Britain decided today to allow Chinese tech giant Huawei to supply new high-speed network equipment, ignoring the U.S. government's warning that it would sever intelligence cooperation if the company was not banned. Britain's decision is the first by a major U.S. ally in Europe, and it follows intense lobbying from the Trump administration and China as the two vie for technological dominance. It sets up a diplomatic clash with the Americans, who claim that British sovereignty is at risk because the company could give the Chinese government access to data, an allegation Huawei denies. Those are your headlines from Radio Cayman's Newsroom. I'm April Cummings.
Stay in touch with Radio Cayman for the latest in news and information.
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, www.radiocayman.gov.ky.
Radio Cayman, your voice, your choice, your radio.
The Business Buzz with Sabrina Turner. Each and every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m. Brought to you by
Cayman Medical Supplies. Call them at 949-6211. Cayman Insurance Center, celebrating 45 years in the Cayman Islands, specializing in property, life, and other lines of insurance products and services. And also brought to you by FSH Designs. Let your imagination grow with FSH Design. Visit fshdesign.com today.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
On a daily basis, making it easy to connect with you, our listeners. Add us to WhatsApp today, 925-3261. That's 925-3261.
Radio Cayman.
Send a text or voice note.
Can I send a request, please?
You don't really have to ask us. Just send a request.
This is a shout out to my ex.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us, and always a pleasure to be able to have the different agencies in government, or whether it's a statutory authorities, whether they're those that within the Constitution are, prescribed to be those entities that set up to sort of help with the administration of good governance and the like. And I've always, with great deference to this, always a pleasure to have the Ombudsman's Office on, and, Mr. Jan Liebers in particular. I remember the days as I affectionately and hopefully, for those who understand protocol and are much more, what do you say, uppity about it. I used to refer to her very respectfully and fondly, Lady Jennifer, just as an endearing term, when she was the head, an incredible lady who served in my own sort of thinking as our ambassador when she was heading up our London office. But an incredible example of what a civil servant is, and a true example of what people aspire to in terms of integrity and ethics and an ethos of hard work. And Mr. Liebers and his entire team, the director and all the supporting cast. As we had a chance to talk about data protection, I think it's important, as he reminds us, check out their website, understand our rights and responsibilities, appreciate that it's not just the people who are employed in government or private sector who collect our data, but us, who are probably the product, it's our information. Well, can we not give up so much information? Can we refuse in some instances? And if so, how and when and the like. They have a wonderful sort of pamphlet for those who like physical hard copies of things. Data protection, your rights and responsibilities that are out. We're going to have a few copies of it, as we usually do for things of importance. Here at Radio Cayman, if you're in and about doing business and visiting us, pick up a copy. Of course, the Ombudsman's office, of course, the website equally. Go ahead and get it there. And ombudsman.ky is their website. Now, it's an open line, 1:30. Mr. Daniel Moxham, if he gets through with all his great baking and all the work, he'll find an hour or so of his afternoon and pop in with us and get a chance to sit and chat with him. Not only a very insightful, learned, well-read individual, but someone who, with civility, with intellect and the like, willing to share. So many, if he doesn't mind me saying, young men like himself, we've called from time to time to share their views with us, whether they spend most of the time on one of our sister islands or whether they're here on Grand Cayman. What seems to be the hustle and the bustle of the big city, we've got some good people who maybe tease us at times with certain topics that cause us to think outside our normally accepted sort of routine. Sometimes they challenge our mindset. Sometimes they will, irritate us, provoke us, cause us to want to become, wait a minute, I don't necessarily agree with that. Let me counter with, a different perspective. That's what makes a democracy healthy, what makes a populace engaged, what I think would make a government, effective, because those who are elected and then therefore those who have been assigned or appointed to certain position would say, well, there's a populace that is asking, not unlike the things we're seeing transpiring in societies that may say, well, should this thing be this way? What if it was this way instead? Could that, along with this, coexist simultaneously? And if it was this way now and it's no longer, well, why? And is it because we're seeing the change in sort of mindsets of the particular people who now occupy that sphere of influence? Well, what is your view? 949-8037, or you can call us toll free at 1-800-534-8255. We invite you to WhatsApp if you so choose, 925-3261, and to be a part of our discussion. Now, I can imagine that increasingly it's probably challenging for some of us to balance all the things that we have on our plates, the demands of our professions, our occupations, the trades, the work that we do, that either because we run the business, either because we're recently employed in the business, or we're, at that particular juncture in our careers that we're thinking, what, too old to start something new and, still too young to have to pack it all in and sail the world. But there are other times when we think, is there more to it? Is there something else? Is there not just more in terms of the paycheck that I can cash or the savings that I can accumulate, but is there more I can get from it, more I can give? And then when we see the changes, take for instance, if you, like some of us, and some of us probably increasingly don't, because we may find it to be not just distressing and stressful and find it to be, oh man, that's just, adding another burden to the plate. But if you watch the international media, maybe you focus on the things that are happening within the UK, not only an exclusive surrounding this issue of, this recent elections and the Brexit, but maybe you're looking at the US. They have an election coming up in short order, and you're thinking, well, I hope this person is elected or re-elected or the like, and you get into the discussion. Do you then ask yourself the question, well, if I'm watching one particular media, is the information there the same, just packaged and repackaged, but it's the same? Is it objective and impartial? Is it, timely, accurate information that gives you a perspective so you can make up your mind? Or is it sort of presented to you that, hey, this is it, you don't need to think for yourselves, this is all it is, don't worry, we got you covered, we'll do all the thinking for you. And I was speaking to someone, and at first I listened and I thought, wait a minute, didn't realize that you were so religiously devout. Person said, no, by no means. He went on to share that the more he starts to explore certain things, the more he realizes that he's convinced of his initial beliefs. But he was very, very defensive of the notion that if people in schools in particular, in public spaces, if they wish to express their faith, whatever that is, and they want to pray, as long as it isn't intrusive. So I asked him, well, if a group of people, 2 or 20, doesn't matter, assembled in a space and they wanted to pray about something, someone was ill, they were seeking prayer, sort of a guidance before they embark on their meeting. He said, not a problem. That could be a school building, it could be the public town hall, he said it could be the courthouse. It doesn't matter. That's what they wanted to do, that's what they do. And he said, isn't it strange that we would, perhaps do things to champion other things, protection of, a particular species of plant, perhaps, looking after an animal or the like. But yet when people would like to exercise their faith, we make an issue of it. And he said, isn't that one of the biggest challenges, that we spend so much time trying to find ways to divide ourselves that we no longer are able to interact as people. People in a particular organization, he said he worked with a long time ago, and they would deliberately, every month set aside time to do different things. And he said this was long before it was a big PR thing for organizations to do it. So the organization, some of whom were members of different service clubs, different church organizations, different civic organizations, they would get together, and those who could make it would come out. They would do little things that would be in today's language, doing like a community cleanup. Maybe they'll go and they would help things nowadays are being marketed as National Community Volunteer Days and all sorts of things. And it looks good for the organization's perspective, and it probably, when you get hundreds or thousands of people contributing thousands and thousands of hours, it could make a meaningful impact. But they did it because they thought it was important for the team to appreciate that it's not just about making a lot of money, it's about being invested. But there was a thing about seeing people outside of their normal sort of habitat and doing something that it was for others when there wasn't really anyone else paying attention. So there was no one taking photos other than maybe one or two. And he recognized that it was a different era way back then. But in addition to those sorts of activities, they would meet at someone's house and, cook some food or order some food, and things are different. Nowadays, he said, if you had that sort of thing, there are all sorts of concerns. He called it the personnel department. I'm kind of glad he did, because I was able to relate to it. Now it's called something else. They would probably have all sorts of guidelines. You can't meet outside of hours in this way. And granted, we probably need to be cognizant and very conscious of our behaviors in another uniform, as it were. But his premise was that as a people, we've found more ways to divide ourselves. We found more ways to punish people for what not long ago were just things that people did. Now, I want to make sure that I don't misrepresent his thoughts. He said no one should, be willing to condone someone's behavior that makes others, uncomfortable or puts them at risk or treats them in a way that not only is it uncivilized but unwanted. And he shared, it's so unfortunate that we do so much, and then when someone now wants to, perhaps, as he shared, maybe they're at a restaurant and they're a group of people and they decide, we're going to have a prayer just to bless the food. As he says sometimes, well, at least if they pray for it, that it doesn't poison anybody, well, that wouldn't be a bad thing. If there's someone there who doesn't want to, they shouldn't be offended. Not one person shouldn't stop the others. If it's only one person that wants to pray for the food, should that offend the other 2 or 20? Now, I ask that and share that in light of your thoughts with respect to how we're seeing our community sort of evolve. He has made, not his words, mine. From what he shared, I've said, okay, here's your prediction. And he was quite adamant, saying, nope, not making a prediction. But I still say to him that I interpret what he says as a prediction. He says that as it stands now, what he sees potentially happening as we get into the election fever, when we start to jockey in position for the next cycle of sort of parliamentarians, he said we're going to see people who, through their posturing, going to be looking more for position and pomp and circumstance as opposed to anything meaningful. Seeing the people that are wanting to be elected from the perspective of their sort of positioning, of their persona, maybe easier to interpret this way, style over substance, simply because they're presentable, they've been packaged, and not really those who are able to put their hands together and get the work done. You want the people who are photogenic, with a good smile, and who has elected someone that looks good in the right clothing. Again, style over substance. And he says that's just part of what we're looking at. But he did offer up a caveat, and that is that when you're looking, whether it's the sort of the changing of the guard, or whether it's the notion that there's going to come a time, sort of my understanding of his inference is that that's going to come perhaps more abruptly than some anticipate. And I share that because I think it's intriguing, especially when we have days like yesterday, not just the unveiling of the new statues and the like, and as deserving as we see our people in our society, we recognize that there are so many who are still unsung heroes in our communities, who really, maybe it's who they are, their nature and the like. Maybe it's because we still don't appreciate that little thing that we may still see as being pesky was actually so significant that but for that little thing, we wouldn't be able to enjoy all these great things since. Maybe there are all sorts of reasons. Their ethnicity, their economic background, their education. Could be all sorts of different reasons. But sometimes it's what we increasingly hear. And I'm mindful that a good friend of Ray Banker has reminded me and has shared it, at least a decade now. He says, that African proverb, not until the lion has a biographer, the hunter will always be a hero. Well, however you interpret it, however you paraphrase it, if the written record doesn't accurately reflect, all the players, then that one who writes it can always write it to reflect, the tale to look better, for the writer, as opposed to sometimes not just taking poetic license and embellishing the truth, but perhaps skewing it in such a way. What we say, control the narrative. And when or if the media, whether that's the traditional media or whether that's the other sort of avenues and platforms that exist, can skew things. Take, for instance, I didn't see it when it first was published, partly because, with the greatest respect, they're just people. I really have little or no interest in what goes on in their lives, but it seems to be the discussion of everybody. One of the Queen's, Her Majesty's grandsons was presumably, I don't know how long ago and to what extent, and again, it doesn't really matter, was making a gesture with his hand. From one angle, you could interpret it that he wasn't being very kind, but from the angle that the picture was taken, or intended to be taken, looking straight on at the young prince, he was saying, hey, good job, we're moving forward, we're looking up. But if you saw it from, the other angle, well, you would have thought, wow, I thought he was raised better than that. And I should have to say that sometimes not only a matter of perspective, it could be the maliciousness, deliberately maliciousness of someone to make others look bad. A fellow once said a very long time ago, he said, the minute you get into public life, rest assured that either they're going to dig in your closet and find something, and they're going to blow it up and make it as worse as it is. And if it isn't anything there at all, they're going to invent it, all right? And they're going to, make sure that you become the pariah. And it probably comes back to this notion that in order for some people to look good in their minds, they got to make you look as bad as possible. And it's unfortunate. It is truly unfortunate. But hey, it's a Tuesday. I mean, why don't we have some fun? Do you want to start a revolution? Okay. How about this? Let's start reading some books, going to school and educating ourselves to the point where our discourse can be so meaningful and impactful that it is not about guns and ammunition and wars and sort of war and factions, but it's about dialogue and action, physically, constructively, positively doing something to help others. Sometimes we see our neighbors and we wonder, how are they really getting by? We have so much that is being spoiled from our table, but we may very, very consciously pretend that, the people next door, sometimes not literally next door, they don't have enough. Sometimes we believe that the big checks that we write makes a difference, and they do. They probably appreciate it, but then are we asking for accountability? But is there something else we can do other than writing the big check? Now, when you can, whether it's 50,000 or 50 billion, I'm sure it can be utilized. But is there another way? Can you see as a man, a young boy, and genuinely, in a very nurturing, appropriate way, stare that young boy? What about that young, if I can say that young girl, without it being, not only inappropriate but perceived as such? Can you do things? And thankfully, there's so many who do just that. Sadly, there's still a few who, for whatever reason, maybe we're just malicious, maybe we're just very, very, very cautious, and we say, listen, we gotta be suspect of all these things because just never know. Hey, takes all kinds. Well, 949-8037, 1-800-534-8255. As we reference, Mr. Daniel Moxham, hopefully, he'll have a chance to step away from, all of the, I would say, that's the heat of the kitchen and the heat from his oven, but he's an industrious entrepreneur, and I admire his drive. Also appreciate not just his tenacity and his conviction and the notion that he's willing to share, like a few others who've called and from time to time ask us, well, what about this? Who equally sometimes probably are much more informed about the things that are being reported in the international media than some of us who are paid to do so, or some of us who find that, yes, we make time to, I still say, read the international papers. Now, for some, we can do it online in an electronic format, but for others, it's nothing better than having that smell of what that newspaper print is, and to feel it even on your hands, and you wash it and you go, man, I'm not sure I got the ink off my fingertips as yet. But there's a thing about that. Now, that luxury, I think a friend shares, no longer has the leisure to do that. Sunday afternoon when it's still quiet, to sit back somewhere in a comfortable seat, enjoy a glass of lemonade, and just watch it. Even here in Cayman, where January, especially the last couple of days, have been a bit cool, but not just in July and September when it's hot and muggy, to be able to do those things. And as he said, it's coming a luxury. It's a chance of where you share your leisure, not like how others may choose to spend their spare time, their free time. It's just, a way for us to reflect on how rapidly our lives have changed, and the little things in the past that we almost took for granted are things that we have to really make a very concerted effort to enjoy, like reading that newspaper, physically touching the newsprint, as opposed to the latest this little gadget that we can, and we can quickly on multiple screens, toggle between different editions from across the globe, which is great. It gives us a chance to be able to compare. But again, for those things that you once liked, and looking at the way the world has changed, is that in fact that luxury? Well, 949-8037 or toll free with the kind compliments of Flo at 1-800-534-8255. Likewise, you can WhatsApp 925-3261. We invite you to call and share your thoughts. Let us know what you think, and you can decide. Listen, you know what? I just had enough of everything, and this is how it's gonna be, and you can lay it out. Now, for some of us, we can't do that without us being very, very emotionally charged, and sometimes we're fearful because we are cautious that the language may not be the language that we may want to portray publicly, and that is a sign of people who are civil and respectable, and we understand that. But we still invite you to call, because it's true that willingness to engage publicly and to, as some have said, I just need to get us off my chest. Well, we're willing to be the ear that listens to what you have to share. You let this avenue be the one that you explore in order to convey what your thoughts are. We'll pause, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we invite you to join us. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
ValueMed Pharmacy is your community care partner for health and wellness needs. We offer convenient prescription processing at the counter and online at value-medpharmacy.com. That's VALU-medpharmacy.com, with pickup available at the Walkers Road or Boddentown location. We also accept transfer prescriptions from other pharmacies. More than just a pharmacy, shop ValueMed for personal care and beauty products from trusted brands, perfume and gift sets, Hallmark and greeting cards, baby clothes, footwear, handbags, swimwear, home decor, toys, school supplies, and stationery. And home convalescence aids like wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, canes, and hospital beds. With 2 locations to serve you, Walkers Road in Georgetown and in Evron Plaza, Boddentown. Visit ValueMed, more than just a pharmacy.
Headlines.
With the latest headlines.
One of Cayman's bright and shining young stars.
Local, regional, international.
Headlines.
Turning to international news. Updates on the hour between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays. All the news when you want it. Tune in to Radio Cayman for hourly headlines of the day's top stories.
Radio Cayman, your voice, your choice, your radio.
The Lions Club of Grand Cayman Breakfast is back. Yes, Saturday, February 2nd, starting at 7 a.m. at the Lions Community Center. Enjoy a tasty Caribbean breakfast of fried fish and fritters, liver and onions, and ackee and saltfish, starting at only $10, and help support your community. The Lions Club of Grand Cayman supports sight screening, prostate and colon cancer awareness, Miss Teen, spelling bee, and so much more. Get your Caribbean breakfast and support the Lions Club of Grand Cayman in their community efforts happening Saturday, February 2nd, starting at 7 a.m. at the Lions Community Center.
This is a reminder for you that on Thursday at 7 p.m. on Radio Cayman, you're invited to listen in to a repeat broadcast of the CI Retro Talk Today special presentation, when the focus was on exploring and celebrating the path to the first Cayman Islands written constitution in 1959. CI politics and governance. You'll hear from some of those who walked that path and fought those battles in an effort to secure and preserve the CI identity. This CI Retro Talk Today presentation is being brought to you by Parsons Air Conditioning, Refrigeration, and Appliances on West Church Street in West Bay. Call Parsons at 949-3945 for all of your air conditioning, refrigeration, and appliance needs. That's on Thursday at 7 p.m., the next presentation of CI Retro Talk Today on Radio Cayman.
Talk Today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back to Talk Today. 949-8037 or 1-800-534-8255. I guess I should just confirm with Miss Susan. Are we still up on YouTube, Miss Susan? Do we have that one-night monster camera training us? I tell. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I guess when you're young and, you probably don't mind these things, but when you're like some of us, me in particular, you just like the purity of radio. I say that to share that if you are online and you're looking at me looking at the whole idea of looking at the one-night monster, well, it's part of what it is. There have been a number of our listeners, and not just in the last hour or so, but from very early this morning, sharing some concerns in relation to the coronavirus. Now, one or two of you who sent, I guess they call memes, where people make little jokes. Some would say, listen, I'm not trying to downplay that by any means, but sometimes you look at things in a little, probably less, a serious way. So those were good too. But in all sincerity, I'm grateful of grateful for the interest of so many who have expressed concern that we're seeing this coronavirus almost globally, and whether or not what is being reported in the international media is right. Is it the 90,000 cases in China? Is it 100 plus cases in the US? Is it the 4 cases in Canada? Is it this? Is it that? Whatever the case is, as it is. Some have shared that the whole issue with respect to our neighbor right next door in Jamaica, and I was just trying to get it where on RGR there's a press conference with the Prime Minister and the Minister for Health, the University of the West Indies and the like, and they're showing that it's there, and they have one case of an individual. Now we're seeing that, like a lot of things that are transpiring globally, that we have perhaps because of international travel and the relative ease with which people move, the interconnectedness of our citizens across the globe, the commerce, the influence of some economies on the world economy as it is, the notion that we're looking at it. And there was one individual that I had a chance to speak to. I sent a quick message, hopefully to get a response, because I think she's one of those people that has a particular insight. Someone who, I guess, work causes her to travel, perhaps now not as much as in recent times, and whose sort of perspective helps to inform those of us who are willing to listen. I recall her sharing at one time that, look how, when we travel, how certain jurisdictions are more accommodating to those who travel, and some require more information from you, as it were, in order to enter their borders. And then when we had the unfortunate incident of September 11th, that fateful year, almost 20 years ago, to when we had other things occur across the globe, we're seeing increasingly, she has shared, that we may get to a point where there is more challenge, as it were, for people to migrate to different jurisdictions. She recalls trying to recruit particular staff from one jurisdiction to the next, and where she thought, that would be relatively easy because it was at once. Now, all of a sudden, it was still easy, but there were more sort of vetting information required by the agencies of the government who were going to approve the process. Now, she says that when those things happen and it's in a jurisdiction like Cayman, other places, people make unfortunate comments that are disparaging, not to appreciate that in larger jurisdictions that are part of the sort of the the G7 nations, they sometimes require other information. Just happens that it may be easier to process, it's more standardized, but it's still that you require to provide a lot more in some instances, depending on the particular circumstance. But as she was sharing with the notion of whether it was the Ebola scare a long time ago, it only became, in some instances, of significance once it left a particular part of the world and entered another part of the world. But what are we doing to make sure that the citizens of the world, whether they are looked at as from poverty-stricken nations or whether they are from large industrialized nations, if there is a particular illness or there's a particular occurrence that threatens a populace, should it not receive the same level of concern and attention and action? And unfortunately, the answer is that it's not the case. Now, with all that in mind, where are we? Some of us, from the perspective of the Cayman Islands, welcoming 2+ million people to our shores on an annual basis, population of 100,000 or thereabouts, people that are very, very apt to travel very frequently throughout the region, but equally are able to hop a flight and in 24 hours gone from multiple jurisdictions and multiple time zones to spending a few weeks in far off places, partly because of the access and connectivity, partly because of the affluence, but also partly because of the influence of people we meet who say, you should visit this place. It's now no longer that remote, inaccessible, no longer that dangerous, or no longer that unwelcoming, or no longer that expensive. And again, that's one of the wonderful things of sort of being based here. But with that, there is a level of responsibility for ourselves, our safety, our security, our health as well. Well, your thoughts? 949-8037, 949-8037. Or you can call us toll free with the kind compliments of Flo, 1-800-534-8255. Or you can WhatsApp 925-3261. What do you want to talk about? And as we've seen the responsiveness, the professionalism of our fire service personnel, and looking at the fire recently, as we've heard the speculation and conjecture from some of our citizens relative to the private contractor, as they were moving around the vehicles there and what potential that could have ignited the fire. One relatively young person said, this is just another reason why maybe, and this is what I say out of the mouth of babes, a relatively young person saying, maybe the priority for the country needs to be addressing that whole issue that is there, irrespective of how important it is to look at building new schools or developing other infrastructure. Now, this young fellow, as a student, sort of not that far away from heading off to university, is thinking, partly because maybe of the subjects and the discussions in the classroom, which is again another testament to the level of interest and sort of intellect that we're developing within our schools. Perhaps it's part of the organizations that our children are introduced to and being able to partake in, whether it's the discussions at home and otherwise. Certainly it is the awareness of things that are happening globally. But as I listened to the young man who said that we probably, because it's a quote-unquote government project, and probably, if I did not misunderstand what he was saying, or perhaps did not miss some of the things that he said, because it's just one of those things where you're having a conversation and there are multiple people talking, and some of us, maybe because of our stature, we're not as tall as the others surrounding, maybe because of our age, we may be more intimidated because of the older ones around, or because of the environment, we maybe not as encouraged to share. But as he was saying, the notion that potentially we become sort of scared into taking quick action, potentially because something's been discussed for an extended period of time. We may feel the urgency, and instead of it costing one amount of money, all of a sudden we're prepared to commit a whole lot more. Now, he was much more diplomatic and eloquent in how he shared his comments, but I'll interpret it and repeat it in the way I thought I heard it said, and that is that we now spend this amount. It's government's money, so it's not really anybody's money. It doesn't really matter too much, and it's going to be spent. It's going to be paid back over perhaps decades, so it really doesn't matter. Nobody's really paying for it, and does it really matter if we get true value for it? Now, of course, our politicians and senior civil servants, our accountants and auditors and the like will say, nope, that's not the way we do it in the private sector. And that is great. The voters will say, no, we demand responsible, fiscal policies and the like, and that's great. But in the practice, in hindsight, is that what we will have? And as I was listening to the young student share, maybe part of the problem is that we believe we can do many things at once and do them successfully, as opposed to saying, well, let's tackle the important things, and some of us would say, well, let's prioritize. What are we going to do? Well, his view, whether we call it the landfill or the dump or otherwise, why don't we figure out what we can do there? And if I heard what he was sharing with those who were listening, well, do we be honest with what is it that we're facing? And is it that we do it where it's at? Do we move it to elsewhere? Now, this is a student, and unfortunately, again, my inference, like so many people, if they say something and it offends someone without even them realizing that comments have offended people, will they not get invited to participate in certain things? Will they be fearful that scholarships and internships and future employment and whatever else could be a consequence? Well, let's go to the phones. Good afternoon, welcome. You're on Talk Today.
Hello, good afternoon, Rambo.
Hey, how are you, my friend? How was your day?
Oh, good. Can't complain. Sterling.
Yes, sir.
I contribute today about this coronavirus there. Right? It seems like that virus is an endemic and I've been prevailing in the centuries, right? And when we took it off now, they're speculating if it's bat, super, or snake, or reptiles, or whatever, right? And we got to take serious measures with this. It's very crucial, right? They're speculating by March, right? 1/3 year, right? That globally it can spread epidemically, seriously, right?
Yeah.
And one source I get from yesterday, Russia have a dozen vaccines, right, including HIV, to counteract it. But in time by March, it can be pandemic spread. So came on now, starting being serious now. You know, came on now, we got to spend live surgical masks in abundance. Hand sanitizers, latex gloves, seriously. Some other media streams, right? They're saying if it's a bioweapon, we don't know, right? But you think, the extraordinary, you understand? You got to be on. Instead, one thing I say now,
right?
See me personally, everybody means physical form, right? But you see, came on now, when you got politics, you have mudslinging and innuendos now, right? They have politicians that serve one term and they resign. Some of them serve the whole term, whatever the case may be.
Right.
So, why I say to you, Sterling, me personally, or whoever want to run, right? You better walk with politics or you walk over here. You see where I come from? So, you got to face reality, face the music if you want to run politics. I don't skeletons now, my closet now. I call you Northward, but that was 2016, right? We talk about ammunition and warfare, right? I don't hide nothing, straight up. You know who know me? So where I come from? Okay, and one thing, sir, like I say, again, I hope KMA takes serious measures. Like I say again, I don't keep repeating myself like a broken record, but take serious measures with this thing. It's a first thing. The bullet thing with 2015, 2014, it was kind of serious now, right after coming around about this one, yeah? Yeah, this one crucial. Seriously.
But that's the thing, though. We look at Ebola and SARS, and then we see this one, and over time there are different things. I mean, we even probably look back at the H1N1, for instance, and now we say, oh, that was nothing. But sometimes you have to wonder to what extent, when these things come to the fore, what are we doing to, as you shared, to respond in a way that makes our populace as safe as possible? If I may, though, do you think then we're going to get to a point where, I'm just use, as you said, surgical masks, or people are walking around covered in certain articles of clothing? We're no longer, when we see our friends and family, interacting with them normally, give them a hug and a handshake and embracing them like we would normally, because we become fearful. Are those things that potentially should be of concern to us as well in relation to how we may disengage from people socially?
How on this crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like futuristic. Seriously.
Yeah.
It's in a way futuristic. It may sound far-fetched, right? But it's futuristic, man. If you have to isolate yourself and you say you look like you some scientists.
Mm-hmm.
Look away by precaution, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You eat every few things, your brain, your lungs, your heart,
mm-hmm.
right? So you bring it slowly, a couple minutes more, longer. You know what I'm saying? So.
Well, let me ask you then, if I may, right? You talked about using as a biological weapon. Again, some would say, well, let's not get into conspiracy and let's not be irresponsible. So that's try hard to avoid that. But what if, whether this or something else in the future, we understand the human genome has been mapped, we understand how we can manipulate DNA for good, bad, or otherwise. What if somewhere, whether a government entity or some other nefarious outfit decides, you know what, let's make sure that we release this thing that targets this subset of the populace for this particular reason, population control, or just for, let's see what happens. Nice, wonderful societal experiment to see what would happen. We become mice in a maze.
Yeah, sorry about like I said again, but like speculations.
Mm-hmm.
If it passes through per lake Indian, it's where it come from. It's speculation, but boy, you just don't know.
Yep.
Like say for instance, hurricane. We prepare for hurricane now. Like 1st of June to end November, we prepare for her. You're always based on impact. Search, water search.
Right.
Water, can't fool over. But like I say again, Sterling, some of these viruses, right? They can survive 100 years now, especially in the cool weather.
Mm-hmm.
And with the climate change, that's what it spreads now. Even if it's the same flu, that's how it is now. This time of year, the flu season. So, that's how it is, my Sterling. That's how it is. It's a reality check. And how came on health service.
Yep.
I've been stuck with that now, really true. I see 2 roads Jamaica, they speculate for dengue fever, one patient, dengue fever or coronavirus. But they better check that child history, right? Or whoever, you understand?
Right.
Serious measures, whoever, you understand? The surroundings, the environment, where it was before and after.
Mm-hmm.
Really true. So then, take care, man. Cool.
All right, blessings, man. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. All right. We'll pause and we'll take a short break. When we come back, we invite you to be part of a discussion. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
King Sports Center takes pride in being more than just an ordinary gymnasium. For 14 years, their multi-purpose facility has been providing the community with a variety of sporting, recreational, and relaxation activities. King Sports Center has a bowling alley, lounge bar, multi-purpose rooms, powerhouse gym, rock climbing wall, bungee jumping, a 10,000 square foot rink, and so much more. For more information on the variety of services, call their friendly staff today at 946-5464 or email kings@candw.ky or visit www.kingsportscenter.com. King Sports Center, your one-stop shop for fitness, recreation, and relaxation.
Your Radio Cayman 6 p.m. news, Monday through Friday, is brought to you by Logic, your life connected.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
On a daily basis, making it easy to connect with you, our listeners. Add us to WhatsApp today, 925-3261. That's 925-3261.
Radio Cayman.
Send a text or voice note.
Can I send a request, please?
You don't really have to ask us. Just send a request.
This is a shout out to my ex.
Radio Cayman, the voice of the Cayman Islands.
Radio Cayman, maintaining the innovation.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waiting to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. 949-8037. 1-800-534-8255 is the Flow toll-free line if you want to call and share your thoughts. And if you want to hit us up on a WhatsApp, well, you can do a voice note. You can send it through. We'll read it if you text it up. Either way. 925-3261 is our WhatsApp line. It's open line, 949-8037 or toll-free at 1-800-534-8255. I was just quickly looking at something during the break, and person shares, this is another indication of the end of the days. It may be, some point to the raging wildfires in certain parts of the world at different times of the year, the unprecedented weather patterns that occur at, times of the year where you expect it to be cool and it's, unusually hot, or it's hot when you expect it to be cool. It's more rain when it's normally isn't expected to be rain, or it's a drought. The things that seem to be anomalies. And then people say, well, look, you're having this conflict. Some would say, well, if you look at relationships, marriages, or just people who otherwise would get along, co-workers, teammates, or the like, and all of a sudden there's mayhem and mischief, strife, as it were. People say, see, there it is, the enemy coming against to divide and to kill and to conquer and the like. Now, for some, they would say all it is that the people aren't being responsible stewards of what they have. They are being greedy. They're being, perhaps behaving badly, as it were. And this is the consequences that we're reaping. Some would share. If you look at, for instance, the recognition by governments internationally on an increasing basis, considering the amount of food that is being wasted, not just in our homes, in our supermarkets, in our restaurants, in our cafeterias, whether in educational institutions or otherwise, when we calculate the impact, not just the amount of sort of pollution from the production of the food that has been wasted, to the fact that economically there's billions of dollars that are sort of just gone to waste, to the millions of people who otherwise without food or without sufficient food. Now, whether you subscribe to the notion of what it's been termed as dumpster diving, or there are other things, is it that we don't see the consequences of our actions? Or we have refrigeration and other ways to preserve our foods without using chemicals and other means to prolong their shelf life. But if we cook something that we think, relatively speaking, is healthy, and we serve it on our plate, and then after we've looked at the plate and we've had what we think is our fill, are we able to then take the remainder and place it in appropriate container to have for later? Respectfully, is it our mindset that, I'm not going to eat this again, so I just dump it? And it may not be much, it may not be a second thought, but maybe there's some of us who would say, well, thankfully there's a pot of food there, but I don't know if I'm going to have half a serving or 3 servings, but let me take out what I think I can eat, and if I want more, I'll go back and get a little bit more, and then I may end up making 2 trips or 10 trips. But you put what's on your plate and you eat it, and then the rest, you didn't, what is it that our old people say, you don't dig up into it. So if someone else comes along, you can serve them because, you've been respectful in how you've taken food and not just preserved it and presented it, but when you were serving yourself, you didn't just think of, well, only you one would eat. Now, again, not sharing that to offend anyone's sensibilities or their accepted practices, but is it that we need to be more considerate? Now, from that perspective, how much of that waste, as I was thinking to what the young man was sharing, ends up in our landfill, and how much of that could be diverted to something else so that it doesn't already add to an already overburdened problem? Well, the phone lines are open, and we invite you to share your thoughts with us, 949-8037, or your toll-free call at 1-800-534-8255, and you can WhatsApp 925-3261, and who knows, you may want to talk about something completely different. I mean, you may just want to be very pensive, jovial. You may choose to say, you know what, nobody's talking about this thing. Why? And it may be something that truly important, but nobody is as courageous as you to share their thought. Or it may be, wait a minute, but we're not seeing it from this angle. Yeah, we're talking about it, but have we really looked at it from this perspective? Or if we have we considered the implications of it as, much as we perhaps should, or we are, but not publicly? Well, in any event, the opportunity is yours. 949-8037, or toll free at 1-800-534-8255. And the best person to be the gatekeeper to your thoughts is you. Don't let anyone influence you in a way that denies your voice. Don't let anyone inhibit the opportunities that exist for you to share publicly. As you go to our phones. Good afternoon and welcome. You're on Talk Today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling. How you doing, sir?
My good friend, how are you today?
I'm all right, just here. Just thought I'd give you a quick call. I was listening to you on the drive back in. But you're in media, and you guys are like the state-sponsored, radio sort of station. But can you enlighten me and the rest of the public why government takes a particular position? What I'm referring to specifically is the article in today's Compass where it's talking about Jamaica looking at a plan B in light of the obvious troubles that the current administration is having with trying to get the cruise port passed by the people or accepted by the people here in Cayman. But in the article I read with great interest, again, it's the ghost ship phenomenon that's probably well ventilated. It's been in the Compass now. It's been in CNS. It's been in the other online sort of facility. But the government have absolutely nothing to say. No comments, no answers to questions from media, no answers from questions from Cruise Port, CPR Cayman, no questions to answer from anybody. And I'm just wondering, as somebody in the media, is that a deliberate strategy to basically hope that the issue will go away? Or have they been caught with their hand in the cookie jar and they just think that that's par for the course and they don't need to address any of these issues which speak directly to transparency, good governance, and who exactly is directing the Cayman Islands government? Because, as I said in the article, it feels as if we're taking instructions from a foreign country as to what is in their best interest, and their interests then dictate what should be the national priorities of the Cayman Islands government. So just thought I'd ride shotgun with you and get your 2 cents on it, because I've never seen... This is arrogance on a completely different level. The government owe us a response, an explanation. It's disgraceful that the Minister of Tourism of Jamaica can basically provide the public with more information about the negotiations and the discussions that have taken place than our own tourism minister, deputy colonel, and the entire government. Do they have no respect for the people of the Cayman Islands, where they think if they ignore it, it will just disappear? Is that how government works in 2020? Because I believe the people are wiser, more in tune, more connected to the activities within the government. But the response from the government on this issue is worse than anything that they've done previously, and it's been really, really poor, where they don't think they should respond to anything from anybody. And my question is, how is that good for democracy? How is that good for transparency? How is that good for the principles of good governance in this country when your government can decide we're not answering any questions and you can go fly a kite? So as a man in the media, I was hoping that maybe you could enlighten us, and I'm not trying to get you in any trouble, but I was hoping that today somebody from the government would have been there, or would call in and ask a question, and tomorrow when they're on, or the next day that they're on, I will call back and ask them, because this is almost a bridge too far.
Well, I guess as I listen to you, maybe the question always, where is the populace? There were you, maybe a handful of others who are asking the questions and who are trying to seek answers. But is it a question when there's nothing good to say, don't say anything at all?
So then, are they saying that the comments from the Minister of Tourism of Jamaica was completely wrong? Was he misrepresenting the facts? Did he embellish the situation? Have they made promises that they're afraid to let the country know of? Are they in negotiations or in cahoots with Royal Caribbean and another country, and their interests are priorities over that of the national consensus? Because had the country been accepting of this project and the way that the government have gone about doing it, you'd already have some type of construction going on, wouldn't you?
Oh, well, so the questions that shouldn't be rhetorical. My friend, if you wish to join us after, fair enough, but respectfully, let's hit the news. Thanks for that. Stay tuned for Talk Today.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have on the island.
Generations present. Your voice, your choice. For today's biggest news. Access to information.
Local, regional, international. This is headlines from Radio Cayman's Newsroom team.
Today's biggest news.
Civil servants representing several departments recently completed a 5-day professional certification course on anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. Organized by the Ministry of Employment and Border Control through the International Center for Parliamentary Studies, the training can lead to a Chartered Management Institute qualification should civil servants want to pursue it. Washington Post employees have condemned the paper after it suspended a journalist for tweets about the late U.S. basketball legend Kobe Bryant. Felicia Sonmez posted a link to a 2016 article about historical sexual assault allegations against Bryant in the wake of his death in a helicopter crash. She received death threats and has since deleted the post. The paper then placed her on administrative leave, prompting a condemnatory letter from colleagues. And Dutch police got to the bottom of mobile phone thefts at a rock concert when they found a man with 30 cell phones in his cycling shorts. The suspected pickpocket is a 34-year-old believed to be in a roving gang of thieves. He was stopped after rock fans alerted police, who then blocked the exits. Those are your headlines. I'm Carsley Fuller.
Stay in touch with Radio Cayman for the latest in news and information.
Follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, www.radiocayman.gov.ky.
Radio Cayman, your voice, your choice, your radio.
Talk today. But I do have some questions. Talk today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program.
Talk today.
Because there are more questions than answers.
What the public is saying.
Waging to take your calls right now. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back to Talk Today, 949-8037 or 1-800-534-8255, or you can WhatsApp 925-3261. It's amazing how our populace is so engaged, so informed, and so very much interested in what's happening regionally, globally, and locally. And as I was reading a handful of things during the break from some of our listeners, as I just responded to someone, it's incredible to know these things, but yet for some reason we are not yet comfortable saying some of these things publicly. Now, I don't know if it's because somehow we are not sure, but if I say that, will I get somebody in trouble? Will it get me in trouble? Not me, the host, but me, the person sending this thing. How will it be perceived? Yes, it may be true, but boy, will people think ill of me? Or is it that we are still a bit timid? We're tentative with our thoughts, as it were, and we can share it amongst friends, people that we trust, people we hold in confidence. Some of the sentiments, just so you recognize, that looking at during the break, had to do with the caller prior, who was asking questions, informing us, but as a not just a general public, but as a voting public, as registered voters who make decisions when we mark our ballots as to who is elected. Should we not be more timely informed? But as one person asked the question, should we not be demanding more information so we become more timely informed? And then another couple of 3 or 4 comments had to do with concerns about the coronavirus. Now, I'm not a physician, and as one person sent a message saying, this is concerning. We're told, well, it's not transmittable human to human. Yet we're hearing again. It's early days, but in Germany, presumably, there is a suspected case of person-to-person transmission. Now, again, maybe it's the fear factor that creeps in the absence of accurate information. Maybe it is the challenges of not just the medical professionals trying to figure this out, but perhaps, again, and forgive the way the language is couched, but it's the politicians and the pundits and those who are handling the policies are trying, maybe because they're following old protocols, maybe their infinite wisdom guides them to say, well, public really can't handle the truth, so let's not give them too much, too soon. But maybe it's to allay what they may see as public pandemonium if we, put out all the information, where as a people that's too stupid to be able to process it and make sense of it. Now, that could be the perception. That could be, as some would say, the unfortunate case. Now, if it is that, again, another reason that our education system, not just here in the region, not just here in this country, but in many parts of the world, failing the populace to be able to accurately, timely, and properly analyze and process information to be able to rationally respond and act appropriately according to the information that we have. Now, that's not going to resolve any issue anytime soon, but as we deploy strategies going forward, maybe it may take a decade or a generation, but could we start considering to ensure that those who come after are better positioned, equipped to be able to so respond? And I look at that and went back to look at a comment someone had shared and said that like the elections of the past, with future elections of those that we sort of return on election day, will it be the same? Will this new round of voting by these newly minted voters produce the same outcomes? Will they be as easily swayed, influenced, induced, and otherwise influenced? Or will it be that a politician now has to be not just more credible, but competent? Well, 949-8037, 1-800-534-8255. And I see that all the message, I think, hopefully it was just maybe sent perhaps too quickly. Person was commenting on one of the views expressed by the caller prior to the break, who was asking, well, our government, in relation to the cruise dock that they're building out there, is there, not important enough for timely, accurate information to be given to the public? And is it then that, but for, as I think I understood what the caller was sharing, but for the information coming out of the Jamaican government, we here in Cayman in particular would not be as informed. Well, this person's sort of sentiment is, well, does that speak then to the fact that they, for those of you who are feeling that, is that an earthquake, Miss Susan? 949-8037. Susan! Yeah? Go to a break. Go to a break. Go to a break, Susan.
a slow glowing dream that your fear seems to hide deep inside your mind. All alone I have cried silent tears full of pride in a world made of steel, made of stone.
Good afternoon. This is Radio Cayman. I'm here with April.
Susan, yes, we just a few moments ago, in fact, experienced what felt like a relatively significant earthquake here at the Radio Cayman studios. It's taken us a few minutes to sort of get back in position to get on the air. We do not have any information at this point because, frankly, most of the staff is trying to just make sure their loved ones are okay and that everyone's safe in the building.
It was very, very strong.
It was, and we don't experience that type of thing too often.
Yes.
So it's important to check on your loved ones right now. We'll bring you any information as soon as we get it. We can tell you that in spite of the shaking in our particular location, right around the government administration building, we really didn't see any damage here.
Yes. But I think, we do apologize to the Talk Today listeners, but Sterling was on air when it happened, and he's like, Susan, did you feel that? And I said, I couldn't talk because it was moving in here. So, yes, it looks like we were just working on the details, but it looks like we might have had a earthquake or tremor. We'll get more details and get it confirmed. We're okay. The Radio Cayman staff is fine. Sterling is fine as well. And I guess we'll keep you informed as soon as we get further details. Okay,
Absolutely.
April?
And Susan, just quickly, I was finally able to get through on my phone, and it did. I do see a report of an earthquake. It says 117 kilometers northwest of Lucia, Jamaica. I do not know, my geography skills are terrible, whether that is the same thing that impacted us. So we are getting reports of earthquakes in the area, and as well, we've had one here today so far. We'll bring you information as soon as we can get it from hazard management officials, but also just check on your loved ones and make sure everyone's safe and okay.
Okay, thank you so much, April. That's April Cummings from Radio Cayman's Newsroom. I'm going to get underneath the door.
touch of your hand makes my pulse react. That it's only the thrill of boy meeting girl opposites attract. It's physical, only logical. You must try to ignore that it means more than that. Oh, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a second-hand emotion? What's love got to do with it? Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? It may seem to you that I'm acting confused when you're close to me. If I tend to look dazed, I read it someplace. I've got cause to be. has a name for it. There's a phrase that fits. But what